early birds. We appreciate it. Um, we'll get started in just about a minute. And while we are waiting, going to launch a quick poll. If you've been on these webinars before, you've done these. They're very easy. It'll show up right on your screen. So let me go ahead and launch that. We'd love just to see who we have here tonight. So we can answer that. Should be a majority of maybe junior, sophomore, freshman. And we got class of 2030 and below of am I in the right place? And yes, you are. You are an underclassman, technically, I guess. Like it. Like these people that are on time, like that guy. All right, let's get started. You guys are on time, so we appreciate it. And really, thank you for joining us. Tonight is going to be specifically on helping underclassmen families, so juniors and below. And what they need to know to get done before the holidays. To maximize financial aid and admissions goals. Um, Real quick, just a couple of housekeeping items. If you have any questions throughout tonight, please just put them in the Q&A. That's the best way for us as presenters to filter through them and answer them, best of our ability. We'll be putting some things in the chat, but we'll save the chat for things that we want to put in there, and maybe a few questions like this one. Would love to hear where everyone's joining us from. If you can just throw that in the chat, city, state, and then we'll introduce ourselves and we'll get right into it. Ooh, Hawaii. First one. Closer to you. Like that. Atlanta. Atlanta's cool too. I like Atlanta. All right. So introductions real quick. My name's Joe Korfmacher. I've been doing college admissions counseling for about 16 years now, my whole career right out of college. I spent 10 years at two different private high schools doing college advising. Worked about 7 years at a private high school in Manhattan as a director of college counseling. Spent a few years at another company doing private one-to-one college advising, and now with College Aid Pro doing the same with families. I'm in New Jersey, have two young kids, and really looking forward to just giving an overview for all of you about what you can expect in the coming years, how admissions have changed over time, and even as recent as this year, and hopefully putting you at ease a little bit if you've come into this a little nervous. And Mike, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Joe. Good evening, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Michael Korch. I'm in Seattle, and this is my third year with College Aid Pro. I worked a couple of years before that in financial planning, so that's I arrived through the back door of helping families with kind of bigger picture financial planning issues. And boy, college kept on coming up, kept on coming up. And before that, I spent 32 years in software, a lot of startups, a few bigger companies that you may know, Tableau and Visio and some others. Born and raised in Seattle. And I've got a 24-year-old, which is kind of shocking, and twin 21-year-old. So I've got two daughters that are seniors in college this year. So I've been just a few years ahead, maybe, of you out there, and really enjoyed my time with CAP, and came to CAP as a consumer like you guys, and learned about it 8 or 10 years ago. So you're in the right place.
Love it. All right. And hopefully a lot of you know who we are at College Aid Pro, but real quickly, our mission is simple. We want to empower families to shop smarter for college and to end the student debt crisis. College costs have become outrageous. I was talking to my father earlier. I went to college in 2004 to 2008, and it's more than double the tuition since I've been there. It's actually about $60,000 more than when I went, which is wild. And we don't think it's fair. And the college process itself of even getting to the point of getting to a college and having to figure out how to pay for it is complicated with early decision, one, two, three with U Chicago now, different scholarships, paying for it, obviously. It's gotten very messy, frustrating, a little scary at times. But we know how it works, both the admissions piece and the paying for it part of it. So we work together here to help families. And we know that, paying for college is really, the biggest, financial concern for 73% of parents, and students going through this. Um, but after purchasing a home, and sometimes even more so, more than buying a home, depending on where you live and when you got the house, paying for college can be the most expensive thing you do in your lifetime, for your children. So we want to help parents pay as little as possible and still, have their child attend the college that they're going to thrive at. So that's what we do here, both of our technology and our professionals. So let me get started here. So you'll see a few questions right here that we answer all the time, or hear all the time. Sorry, from parents. Are we looking at the right colleges? There's thousands of them. Which ones should we? Um, have we started too late? If you're on here right now, you haven't. You haven't started too late. My son wants to go to X school. How many APs does he need to take to have a good chance of getting in? Where can we find actual scholarships that we can actually get? Will we get financial aid? Have we saved enough? And just a small sample here, but this is what we hear every day. And College Aid Pro is here to help you both with the admissions questions and your financial questions. And we have a team of pros from literally across the country. I'm in Jersey. Mike is in Seattle, and our team has been helping families across the board for 20 plus years. So really happy to be here tonight. For those who have maybe who also have a senior in high school now, or one in college, like Mike, it's sort of a bit of a maze to just get to the point of applying to college. 4,000 plus schools, in the U.S. alone, 4-year colleges, 2-year colleges, alike. And how do we get from, right, here are literally all the colleges in the country. How do we get to the school that, is going to be the right fit for my child? And it, revolves around looking for, the schools that are the right academic fit, financial fit, personal fit. And once you are getting closer to a final list, what is that admission strategy to actually get in and get the most money, for college? So that's what we're going to talk through, and want to go over some high level trends that are happening in college admissions right now. First, inflation of applications. So when I applied to college in 2003, I used the paper version of the common application. I applied to 6 schools and mailed it out and hoped that the colleges got my application. Then I got it. It's now, like everything else, 100% online. And I think there were maybe 200 colleges in the Common App back then. There's now over 1,000 and growing. So it allows students to easily just add on multiple colleges when they're applying to them. And even this year, they keep adding on to the Common App and adding different tech. While I'm working with students this year, I saw that as a student's creating a profile and putting in GPA stuff and test scores, some colleges that are less selective will actually pop up on a new dashboard and say, like, we're direct admit, no fee, apply here, and basically like we'll get admitted right away, just to boost their application numbers. So in many ways, this is good. it helps, students that maybe don't, have a ton of guidance or experience with this or counseling at their school to learn about other colleges out there that could be a good fit. But for other colleges, more selective ones, it does, increase their applications and can make it tougher to get into college. Last year in total, we saw a 6% rise in the number of students applying through the Common Application. And so far this year, we're already seeing between a 5 and 10% increase in the number of applications per student this year as of last year. So this could and does change like what colleges would be maybe a safety, a target or reach, and something that, we really want to, pay attention to as parents as you're building that list. I'm close to NYU, so I like to use this example. New York University, their applications have increased more than 50% over the last 5 years, placing it as the fifth most applied to college. The number one school actually is closer, Mike, UCLA, which last year had close to 150,000 applications, and they're only looking to bring in 11,000 students. So, the numbers are going up, and it does not appear to be slowing down. So, something to be aware of. Second thing is selective majors have shaped admission outcome. What I want you to take away from this is that a lot of times you'll Google Ohio State University admission rate or Princeton University admission rate, and you'll get 40%, you'll get 7%. That doesn't really tell the whole story at a lot of colleges. Some schools will just admit a student based on the student just, into the school, and then they can choose the major when they get there as a freshman. But a lot of colleges will review a student based on their major that they put on the application. And certain majors, such as, usually business, computer science, engineering, nursing, things like that, they have far lower admit rates than the colleges themselves. And for instance, UCLA, I'll pick on them again. Their computer science major last year admitted less than 3% of applicants. So less than 3% of computer science majors at UCLA last year were admitted. So that made it actually more competitive than Princeton or any of the Ivies really as a whole. UT Austin, they need about 92% of their incoming class to be, from the state of Texas. So that leaves the other 49 states fighting for about 8%. And their business program accepts fewer than 10% of total applicants. So, trying to get into the business school at McCombs, which is UT Austin's business college, if you're out of state, is nearly impossible. All right. So these are things that you want to look at. And as an underclassman parent, if you know that your child is really hoping to do chemical engineering, making sure that they're getting involved in the right classes and activities and maybe a summer course that really shows his or her love for that subject area could help when the admission counselor is reviewing their application. And Mike, feel free. I think we have a smaller group. I don't see the Q&A right now. So if there are any questions that you feel like are good time for me to answer live, just throw them out there and I'll stop talking. Early applications have made a difference. All right. So early decision, came on many, many years ago. And for those that don't know, early decision, that basically just means that, you are applying to one school and committing to that school. So usually November 1st, give or take, of senior year, you will have applied to that one school and basically say and sign, a parent, a student, and the guidance counselor sign a form saying that if you are accepted to that college, that is where you will attend, and you'll take away your other applications. Colleges, this didn't wasn't developed to help the students really. It exists to help the colleges with their yield management. They obviously have a much better idea that you will attend our school if accepted via early decision because you're committing to the college. Whereas with early action or regular decision, if you're accepted, you can decide if you want to go or not later. And they have, less of an idea if you will attend that school if admitted. Um, this is really important in that strategy piece that I mentioned earlier. As you're building your list, if there is a college that is your number one and you guys feel good about it and they offer ED, it may make the most sense to do that. For instance, a school like Tulane, it's nearly impossible to get in unless you apply early decision. So their regular admissions, admit rate is very, very low. Vanderbilt, admitted 61% of its class last year through early decision. Northeastern, who now has the head of enrollment, who used to be at Tulane, now is really focusing on early decision as well. And just so you know, University of Michigan this year just went early decision, and they didn't do it because they want to, join the party and try to make things easier for students to give them a better chance to getting in. They did it because of everything going on in international students and different things that the government have put into place. They were afraid that more international students, which they rely on a big chunk of, would not apply this year. So they're basically covering themselves. And Michigan often can be maybe a backup school to the IBs plus. Michigan's an amazing school, but a backup to some other schools, and they didn't want that. And they want to make sure that they still hit their numbers. So they now offer early decision at Michigan. But again, they didn't do it, the goodness of their heart for students. It
Joe?
can be, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I have a good question that's on topic right now.
Love it. Yeah, ask
One,
away.
yeah, early decision at smaller schools or state schools, does it play the same way, or is it kind of this is more of a private school thing, or?
Yeah. So it's historically early decision really didn't exist at state schools. There aren't a ton that offer early decision. Michigan now does, obviously a state school. But um you won't see it majority of state schools. Just want to make that very clear. They'll have either priority or early action, regular decision or rolling like UPIT, but they won't have early decision. Yeah, but private schools often do have a lot because they are very, private schools are very enrollment dependent and need to make sure that they're hitting their class and really rely on the metrics of early decision. So was that the question? Just if you're seeing it more at private schools,
I
Mike?
think so, yeah.
Yeah. Um, but again, this is something that you want to really talk through and consider. It's not just, oh yeah, I have a better chance to get in. I'll apply early decision. Yes, you have a better chance of getting in, but what Mike will get into a bit is you're in, but now what they're offering is are that's you kind of lose your negotiating power with their award letter because you committed to the school. Where I was on a call earlier, and a parent said we got into Villanova ED, which is amazing, very competitive school, awesome college, $100,000 a year. They're offered $6,000, so they're expected to pay $94,000 a year. So it's a big decision. You want to definitely think about it. Test scores. All right, so 5 years ago, tell a story. There was a virus around the world. You may have heard of it, COVID, and colleges had to go test optional, meaning they didn't require them to get in because students literally could not take the test. And um, Most colleges have stayed test optional, but many colleges have returned to requiring tests. And all the Ivies have, for instance, have now require it. Ohio State University just announced a week or two ago that they're requiring it for current juniors. So if you're a parent of a junior and you're looking at Ohio State, they're going to require it to apply this coming year. And what I want to just leave here is it is important to take the time to take 2 or 3 SATs or ACTs. It doesn't matter which one. Any college will colleges will accept either. But it can help with getting in. It can help with scholarship money, and it is worth the time, the investment in preparing. And if your child doesn't do well, there are plenty of colleges that are test optional and don't need them. If you're applying to the UC schools, their tests blind for now, where they won't even look at them. But it's something as you're building that list, you know, having your spreadsheet of what colleges require what, just so you know you're a better consumer going through this. Um, this is more like if you're towards the end of your junior year, beginning of senior year, but the personal narrative, is that still critical? Yes. How will it evolve? Personal narrative is what you guys hear as the college essay. All right. It's one of the more powerful ways to stand out. It allows a student to talk through their story, give their voice. Oftentimes, the admissions counselors who are reading the applications are much closer in age to the student than they are to parents. Um, Side note, moms, it's often moms, don't write your son's essay. The admission counselor knows. They know they can hear it. So let your child do it. But very important to take time to think of a good topic, to edit it, because it allows the student to literally speak to the admission counselor and can make a real difference in the process. How it will evolve, for as long as I can remember, it was the essay. And some schools will have what's called supplemental essays, extra essays. Um, with AI, ChatGPT, um, it's harder and harder for colleges to say, like, did the student really write this or did someone else write it? We don't know. So, we're already seeing a little bit. Some schools are now requiring like a 1 minute video. Interviews may become more and more important. But whatever the medium is, whether it's an essay written or a video, students that can articulate their story clearly, will have a major advantage here. And for parents of juniors right now, I would just say, not right now, but in the new year, it is something that your students should start thinking about what that topic um, may be for their colleges. All right. So again, approximately 4,000 or so colleges in the country. Um, and how do we, what's most important and how do we get through those schools? I'm going to quickly go through, a few things that is, that are most important, to us. Um, so we like to visualize or have our families visualize a funnel system. There are a lot of different ways you can go about, figuring out, what are the right fit colleges for your child. We like the funnel. We're going to start with all the colleges that are out there. And on our technology, our platform, I think Michael will show later, you can filter through schools for all these different, factors, which is really cool. But we think the most important is academic fit. Okay. Do you want finance? Do you want, you know, English? Do you want chemical engineering, aerospace engineering? And after that, I have an idea about the major. That's great. So now there's 200 colleges that have this major. I want schools that are going to give me a chance for a co-op. So for one semester, I can actually work a paid job in that field instead of going to class, make connections, make some money, network, have a better chance of maybe getting a job after college. Awesome. After that, now there's 50 schools that offer that. I want schools where day one I'm going to be with my academic peers. I'm not going to be fighting just to stay afloat at that school. And from day one, I'll be in a classroom of you know 20 students where the teacher knows my name. It's not a giant lecture hall where it's 200 students and my grade is based on two tests. All right, now we have about 12 schools, and this is our list. Our potential list, maybe it's 20 schools, and we now want to break it down a little more. And then we want to go to financial fit. And this, parents obviously are very much involved in this. Um, you know, can you afford it? The federal government is no longer writing blank checks, for you to cash to pay for college. They're capping loans. So we really need to know how much can you afford to pay cash for college, if any? How much do you have in your 529? What merit financial aid options does each individual school that you're looking at have? What are loan options? All of that. And with the passing of the big beautiful bill, this is it's just not a step that you can just skip or kick the can down the road, or that you're just going to figure it out. So really important if you have your list of 14, 20, 30 schools, whatever, to then start saying, all right, which ones are really a pretty close financial fit for us. And then personal fit. Um, so I love telling my students that, are in high school right now and 35, 40 hours of school, that in college, they're going to be in the classroom like 12, 15, maybe hours a week. Most of the time you're outside the classroom. So, what clubs do they have? What's the campus versus outside campus like, or do you want to blend in with the city? And when you walk out of a classroom, you want to be like any other child, adult student, like at NYU in the middle of Manhattan? Do you want to be in a beautiful upstate New York campus where, there's a couple thousand students, but everyone is on campus, everyone, and you're really not driving off the campus, but you're surrounded by people that are caring and a good collaborative community like a Hamilton College in New York. Um, is it a big sports scene? Like a lot of students, they really want to have that team where they're, on Saturdays in the fall, they can go to football and really celebrate. What is important to you? And as you're visiting colleges, listening to the gut, it's important. Some parents and kids will, um, wipe it off and say, it's not how's my gut? No. Walking around just and seeing, can you see your people? Do I feel like I can be happier, or something here rubbing me the wrong way? Listen to that. So academic, financial, personal fit, getting us down to where we have a top 10, or really now it's more like 12 or so colleges. I used to hate like advising and say, no, no, you should not apply to more than 10 schools. It's just too much. But now it's become too expensive and too competitive to, you know, you need to apply to probably at least 10 to 14 colleges is what you should be looking at, when it comes time to apply. And that's also, yep, go ahead, Mike.
Oh, I'm sorry. A good question here that I think maybe you can touch on. It's just about schools where um, can't really guarantee that when the student has let's say, a preferred major, and at admission time, it's like, you can't get into that particular college or that department. How in time when those kind of undergrad requirements are done, does that threaten if you can get into the competitive program, the comp sci or whatever? How does some of that work, or is there any little guidance or suggestions you might offer?
So we asking as a high school student if we can't get into the particular major at a college?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
that's the one I'm taking
Yeah, and
from
that
it.
yeah,
Yeah.
so I get this all the time. It's really tough. It's there's no like one, you know, way to go about this, but and I get this a lot at Michigan. So Ross Business School of Michigan, highly competitive. Um, I know, Joe, I know I can't get um, into Ross. What if I just do economics in the liberal arts school and then transfer? That there is a not that's an option, but I would not advise it because there is a very good chance that you won't be able to transfer once you're in college. It becomes even more competitive once you're in because they're only allowing a handful of students to transfer within the into the major. So my advice, and you can take it or leave it, to families is if your student is set on a major, go to the colleges that will accept them as a fresh incoming freshman into that major. If they don't know what they want to major in, but they want to go to Michigan, that big M has been on their childhood wall their whole life, then yeah, you can play the game and just try to get in an easier major and figure out then. But if you're set on a major, it's not good advice to just get into the college and hope that you can transfer because you may end up graduating 4 years later with a degree that you don't want. So a few things of what as underclassmen parents you can do. I broke it down by grade, and then we'll get over to Mike and he can talk a little bit about affording college. So holiday season's here. Uh, want to give you a list of what you can do in the coming, month, couple months to prepare, regardless of the year your student's in. And I promise this will be shorter than my 8-year-old daughter's Christmas list, who I swear she is trying to bankrupt me with all her ass. But let's start with ninth grade. So parents of ninth graders, your son or daughter has been in school, high school for a semester now. And hopefully they're doing well. If they're not, that's okay. There's still time, a lot of time. But as we go into next semester, we do really want to, make sure that we're exploring their interests broadly. They don't have to decide, all right, these are 3 clubs or sports or whatever that I'm going to do for the next 4 years. Try different ones. See what you like, see what you don't like. We really do want to sample and not specialize here. Um, and I think as parents, starting an activity tracker, kind of just noting what they're doing, when, what's good, what's working, what's not, that definitely can be helpful later. And really want them to, um, as parents, try to just encourage self-discovery. What are they enjoying? Do they really like that, the freshman chemistry class? Why? What about it do they enjoy? Do they want to, maybe try to take an AP down the road? Do they want to do a summer course in chemistry to expand that love of that class? And within the home, establish healthy family communications. Light, supportive conversations about school, talk through like how their effort, but not just getting straight A's and not just the end goal, but really enjoy. We want them to enjoy ninth grade and the next 3 years of high school without a focus of what's next. It's too far for that. And when it comes to college specifically, build curiosity without pressure. So if you're going to, for spring break, you're going to drive down for vacation. If there's a college nearby, bring it up and say, hey, Johnny, there's so and so school. Do you want to check it out? We don't have to. And they say, yes, great. Do a drive, talk through a little bit, see what's cool, buy a t-shirt, have lunch in dining hall, and get out of there. We're not making lists. We're just exposing to, hey, we're in high school now. This isn't the end of the road. For your academics, there's going to be more after high school, and see sort of what's next there. And what's most important beyond anything, though, is just making sure that they're healthy, happy, and doing as good as they can in school. So focusing on just making sure that they're doing well academically. And then our 10th to 11th grade parents, 10th and 11th grade are the most important years for the classes that they're taking and their grades. The UC systems, the University of California system, they actually only look at sophomore and junior year classes and final grades, right? They're not looking at freshman or senior year grades, the classes maybe, but not the grades. So if your child did well last year as a freshman or a sophomore, you want to make sure that they're maintaining that GPA or improving if they can, and being really intentional with the courses they're selecting each year. Usually it happens between now and March, for the next year. And again, if they're starting as a sophomore or junior, to get a sense of, this actually is like an area, this field, engineering, business, English, history, that I could really see myself in, taking some courses as they get into their junior and senior years that match that, and they can dig a little deeper there. And then with their activities, we want to develop with purpose here. It is all about depth. We're not looking to add on 12 things. College admission counselors know that students can't meaningfully be involved in 12 different things. So what are the 3, 4, 5 activities, sports, clubs, jobs, community service that they're involved in? How can they go deeper in that, become a leader, make an impact, all that. And for summer, summer before junior and senior year are really important. Colleges are looking at this. what did your child for 3 months of being out of school do? It doesn't need to be academic. It doesn't need to be a pre-college program. Was it a job? Was it a camp? Was it community service? Was it meaningful travel? Was it anything? Something that they can talk through and put on the application, that shows that they weren't just sitting around for 3 months, um, and beginning to build that, talk through that list. My a very tangible piece of advice you can take away here: don't start building a list until the end of sophomore year. Let them get through halfway of high school before you begin talking about the next stage, for college. But once we get to that, spring, summer, sophomore year, going to junior year, start talking through colleges, visit a few schools, see what they like. Do they want to be near a city? Do they want a 40,000 student school? Do they want a 2,000? And begin having those financial conversations. Obviously, as parents, it's up to you how comfortable you feel about that, but it's too it's too much money, colleges, to not. And most teenagers have no concept of, if they take $50,000 out in loans during college, what that means for them, moving forward. I will leave you with that. I've talked enough. I'm going to hand it over to Mike, and then I will be happy to answer any questions along the way.
Awesome. Thanks, Joe.
All right.
I
Just
put in the chat a little earlier a link to the MyCap software, which is our software. It's the most used by college planners and financial advisors and other folks that provide guidance to families in the country. And it really solves a lot of the problems that Joe's been talking about, and I'm going to cover now, about the averages are dangerous. You read Georgetown, the average price, it's whatever, $100,000, but the average that someone pays is $28,000. Well, am I an average family, or am I a $100,000 family? That's what you want to know. And you only know that through using a tool like this that accounts for your financial position and the academic capabilities of your kiddo for a scholarship potential. So next slide, please. So when we start thinking about, okay, just like Joe's talked about, super important, the academic fit and the options there, the social emotional, and are my people there? Do I see myself thriving there? And also the three-legged stool here, the third leg being cost. And so when we hear that term financial aid, it's really a big umbrella term. What does that mean? We like to explain it in these three buckets. So from left to right, we really like the first in the middle bucket, because that's free money. That's money that means you're going to take less out of your own pocket to pay for school. So first is need-based grants. And this is, from what it sounds like, this is based on the financial profile of the family, of the parent or parents and the student. And it's about income and assets. Those are the two things that are measured. In the middle bucket, then, are scholarships. We love scholarships as parents. I love scholarships as a parent of college students, because financial aid is kind of a double-edged sword. If you had a great year, then the schools are going to say, well, you don't have as much need. We're going to give you less of this free need-based grant. And likewise, if you have a poor year, you might be able to therefore get some more dollars to help, which is great. Scholarships, they're there every year for the 4 years, typically, as long as you maintain some type of a standard GPA like a 3.0 based on what the school's requirements are, and remain a full-time student. Those dollars are going to be, you can account for those for all 4 years. Because remember, this isn't just a 1-year transaction, a one-time thing that we're doing. This is a 4-year expense. The last bucket on the right that gets accounted for financial aid, it doesn't lower the price of school, but it helps to pay for the school. And that's what they label as self-help. So loans, student loans, parent loans, you got to pay that back with interest, and work study, which is kind of half paid by the federal government, half from the institution. So exchange for your student's time. It's not free money, but can help pay the bill. So next slide, please. All right, so this is kind of one of the few universal truths in financial aid. This is is the kind of the simple equation that is used for need-based financial aid. So left to right, you take the cost of attendance, and that's, everything that you would be direct billed by the school for. So tuition, room and board, a little bit of transportation fees, those kind of, big bucket items, minus something called the Student Aid Index, the SAI. Um, this is a derived number, and it's the output of the financial aid applications themselves. Sometimes you'll see it referred to as the family contribution or the expected family contribution. There's some different terms that can be used there. So cost of attendance minus the SAI equals potentially a number, and that's the potential need-based aid. So as a simple example, if a school, we've been talking about these amazingly expensive schools, you have a $100,000 school, you fill out the financial aid applications, and it says, hey, your family should be expecting to pay at least $40,000 a year. Okay, 100 minus 40 equals $60,000. Like, wow, okay, that'd be great. Let's like, all the schools are going to do that. Like, no, that's why we underline potential, because the number of schools of the 4,000 that have the resources to say, hey, if it costs 100 and you can pay 40, there's that $60,000 gap. I know when I was going around with my twins and we'd go to University of Denver and University of San Francisco, really expensive, amazing schools, we had a gap. My first question was, am I paying the gap? Is the school paying the gap? Like, do we meet in the middle? And the answer is, it depends. There's probably 100 schools in the country that say, like Stanford, others that say, hey, if there's any gap, we're going to take care of that. If your student can gain entry, don't worry about it. We'll cover the gap. That's pretty unique. Usually it's only a fraction of it. So you've got to keep that in mind. Next slide, please. So, okay, we talked about income and assets are the areas that are measured for financial aid. So let's talk about like on the right side of the screen here, you've got the parents' assets. Assets being things like cash, checking, savings, brokerage accounts, potentially real estate, those kind of assets. They get assessed. So our parent-owned assets, very specific number here on FAFSA, the biggest assessment is 5.64% of an asset value would be added to the student aid index number. So as you can see, the more assets you have times 5.64%, that student aid index number gets bigger and bigger, meaning you're going to get less aid. Well, what about if the asset is owned by a student? Usually for the bunch of families I work with, students don't have, $100,000 sitting in a savings account. That is extremely rare. I've only had that once or twice happen. I remember once it was a grandparent had passed away and left money to them, and we were having a conversation about college, and the assessment rate for a student-owned asset, depending on FAFSA versus the CSS profile, is secondary form. It's 20, 25%. Even some schools are slightly higher than that. So if that student had $100,000, the school would be assuming maybe 25% of that, or 25,000, is going to go towards paying for school next year. It's a huge difference. So there's some things that we can do and talk about that can kind of change that. Like, can we add mom's name to the student account so then it can be counted as a parent asset, and some other things. So really important takeaway, very common error we see when parents especially are asked about, hey, what's the total of your assets? Usually one of the biggest assets they may have is a 401k or a 403b, or retirement assets, qualified accounts. Never want to include not retirement assets in those totals. Those are protected accounts. They're not expecting anyone to take from retirement to have to pay for college. So don't make the mistake and add that to the number, because then that's going to be used against you. Okay. And assets are valued as, when, might they be assessed? It's essentially at the time you submit the form. So they're not going to want to know to the penny, but it's like, don't give me the value 2 years ago when it was way less. Like it needs to be kind of near time value. Okay, next slide, please.
And as we go to the next slide, there was a quick question, I think.
Oh, okay.
Is a 529 considered a parent or a student asset?
Ah, thank you. That's a good one. We actually have a slide about that as
Oh, here we go. 529s.
leading the witness here. That's
Yeah.
a great question, though. And I see someone also asked about 5.64% per year, or is that for the entire 4 years of school? That's per year. And if you want to be considered for need-based aid every year, then you need to submit the financial aid forms every year. And it's bracketed almost like taxes. So depending upon those totals, it can vary slightly between, 4.8 and 5.64. But that's done on a yearly basis. Okay. Um, and we'll talk a little bit about real estate in a moment too. There's some questions about that. So 529s are kind of a little bit of a special situation. Not every family. I think it's about 40% of eligible families have 529s. There can be some really great benefits to having a 529 college savings account, but we see it oftentimes mishandled in reporting on financial aid that kind of shoots yourself in the foot and messes up your numbers. So in this world, what matters is who is the account owner, and it's, I think, very reasonable to think, well, this 529 is for my son. It's kind of in his benefit. I should include that as my son's asset. No, big mistake. The account owner is usually one or the other parent if there are married parents. But like it shows on the slide, anybody really can own a 529. You could have a grandparent, a neighbor, aunt, uncle, so forth. What matters is the account owner, which is a grown up, a person of legal age. It's for the benefit, FBO, as we say in the financial services industry, for the benefit of this student. So it actually gets reported. If dad's name's on the account, it gets reported as a parent asset. So it's going to be assessed at that much lower level. Almost never will you see the student, as a not of legal age, being an account owner of a 529. That's extremely rare. But we got to be careful because we're going to start to talk a little bit about the differences between the FAFSA form, which is the federal form that essentially all the 4,000 schools will use, and a very, very small set, less than 2% of the schools that use this secondary form called the CSS profile. It's actually a product of the College Board, big a higher education corporation. They have the PSAT and the SAT and other services you probably know of. Those schools, those are kind of the Ivy League and the elite liberal arts schools. It's about 250 schools. They have very different rules in a number of these instances. We'll talk a little bit about that. Okay, next slide. Now the real estate question. So this is very interesting. This may be a surprise for some people today, but it's a really important thing to know about. Is that some of these wonderful institutions on the screen here, Boston College, NYU, Syracuse, University of Miami, typically when your student is interested in a school, one of these 250-ish schools that require the CSS profile, and it's an and, not an or. It's FAFSA and CSS. You got to, especially if you own real estate, you have to be aware because, hey, I live in Seattle on the coasts of the United States, or real estate is expensive. Or if you have the good fortune to have been in your house a long time, you might have a lot of home equity. Some of a good portion of the CSS profile schools, if you're in $1 million house and you have a $200,000 mortgage, you have $800,000 of home equity. They say that's an $800,000 checking account, and they are going to assess that 800,000 as if it were 800,000 sitting in savings or checking or a non-retirement brokerage account. And that, can totally destroy your student aid index and make it so high that you're never going to get need-based aid. So that's something to really be careful of. It doesn't mean you're going to lie and not tell them about it. It means we need to provide the lowest defensible value. And there's some things that we do with our clients and kind of help through that conversation. Now, it's important to know that for FAFSA, one of the nice, and this is where they start to really differentiate. FAFSA says for your primary residence, it's off the books. I don't care if you live in a $200,000 house, or I live about 2.5 miles from Bill Gates's $150 million house. If Bill files the FAFSA, that residence is zero on the FAFSA. CSS profile, though, no, they account for all primary, everything, vacation homes, condos, vacant lots. They want to know about everything. So be aware of that. Okay. Business owners. This is another area that can cause a lot of anxiety and concern about how to, gosh, they're going to assess my business and how do I come up with that value? We help many families that own businesses and kind of through that evaluation. So one of the big differentiators between FAFSA and CSS profile schools. FAFSA says we want to know the value of your business, and it's not always very clear, and people will put in, what they think is a reasonable amount. They only want to know about business if you have more than 100 employees. And I'm a one-person single member LLC sitting in my basement doing this stuff. I don't have to report. I can talk about my business. I do have a business. I'll talk about the income because it's on my 1040 and it's going to be reported as income. But any assets of the business are zero. They disappear because I have fewer than 100. You might know where I'm going now for CSS with some of the things I've said. CSS profile is different because they want to know about any and all businesses. Doesn't matter if you're a LLC or an S Corp or a C. They don't care how you file. I don't care how many employees you have. They want to know about it. And they want to know about the business valuation, gross receipts minus the gross expenses, so on and so forth. So if you have questions about that, let's talk and kind of work through that together. Divorced or separated families. This is an area that is a little bit different than the legal world in custodial versus non-custodial. Kind of, we use some of the same words, but the definition can be a little bit different. Also can be handled a little bit differently on FAFSA versus CSS profile. In the financial aid world, if you're divorced or even if you're separated, they consider that the same thing. And one of the primary differences is as long as those two bio parents, as long as they live in different households, they're in different addresses. If they're in different places, whether they're separated or legally divorced, doesn't matter, they're apart. And okay, then who reports their financial information is kind of the important underlying question that we're trying to get to. On the FAFSA, it's just the parent that has provided more financial support from the time you file the form backwards 12 months, kind of the last 12 months. And that can be enormously impactful for the numbers. And as an example, we talk with a lot of families that are split households, or separated or divorced, and sometimes they're both filing, single, or one is head of household if they're, a child or multiple children. In the FAFSA world, it kind of comes down to who has provided more support. If oftentimes with an amicable kind of split, they try to kind of split the costs and be 50-50, which is wonderful and understandable. That could be a really significant strategic opportunity to talk about, hey, if one parent has a lot more income and assets, is there any way we could make 51% or more of the costs for this 12-month period belong to the person with the fewer income, the lower income and assets? Because that's going to reflect a lot better and potentially get more need. And on FAFSA, only that one parent, that custodial parent, has to file their financial aid forms. Huge impact. Now, CSS profile, very different. Most of the schools say if the bio parents are apart, they're separated or divorced, they're in different houses, we still want to know all about the financial information from both of those bio parents. Oh, and by the way, if one or both of them are remarried, yeah, we're going to want to know about their new spouses as well. And if people raise their hands and say, wait a minute, I'm remarried, my new wife has two kids. She's just taking care of her kids' college. I'm taking care of mine. We have a prenup. Financial aid world says we're not interested in that. That doesn't affect us. We're not a part of that agreement. We want to see all of the financial information. So that can affect potentially what kind of schools you might want to look at from a cost perspective. This is all part of this complex strategy that we help a lot of families through, but you can see how that can dramatically change. All right. Hey, so we deal with families all the time that have higher income and assets, and we might even have some folks today that have already set up their MyCap account in the past. They've put in their income and asset information and the academic information about their student. They're getting their student aid index number, and maybe it's 150,000 or 200,000. Well, if school costs 100 and the forms say you can pay 150, you can understand where the answer is you're not going to get probably any need-based aid. So what are the options? What are we sunk? Are we just going to have to write checks for $100,000 for these more expensive schools? That's where this merit-based aid is incredibly important. So if we look at the schools on the left side of the screen, Alabama, Case Western, Denison, Willamette in Oregon, these are all great schools, really different schools as well, different sizes and different parts of the country. They all are enormously generous with merit-based aid. I have a number of family friends that have kiddos at Willamette. They are not 4.0 high school students. They did not achieve a 1,400 on their SAT, and they're getting 35 plus $1,000 scholarships a year. Phenomenally generous. So you got to cast a wider net and be aware of how these schools run their businesses, where the ones on the right, the Northeasterns and MIT and Harvard and Notre Dame, they don't do scholarships at those schools. They only give discounts based on academic need. So if you don't need, you're going to get a bill that's kind of full price. Okay. So why should we submit the financial aid forms, especially if our SAI is so high, like, hey, we're probably not going to get any need. Why should I bother doing this? We really encourage essentially all the families that we work with to definitely do this. Why? Matt Carpenter, our co-founder, talks about he had a family a year ago that had 2 decimal places in their adjusted gross income, so more than $1 million in their tax form. Tufts gave them a $10,000 need-based grant. So, which is common for us, that's a very extreme example, but it's very common for us. One, I talked to a lot of families that have put the information in the software, brought one school forward, and like, oh my gosh, we're not getting anything. We're done. Like, we're going to be paying full price for everything. It's like, that's one school. There's 4,000. Let's talk about throwing a little wider net and talk about that. And you can find something perhaps that'll fit. Consideration for merit aid. There's more and more schools that if the time comes when they're considering that merit aid opportunity, if they don't see a FAFSA on file for that family. FAFSA filing is kind of a symbol of saying, hey, if you have some free money, we would very much like to be considered for it. And if that's not on file, they're going to skip right over your student and kind of go to the next family. Maybe your only chance to apply for aid. There's a surprising number of schools that say freshman year, if you don't have those financial aid forms, come later than sophomore, junior year, like, oh, now something's changed. We really want to apply. If they weren't on file for freshman year, they won't consider any appeals, won't consider any type of aid. I touched on the appeals part. That's extremely important. They want to see those financial aid forms. especially if something has changed that allows that opportunity to have that conversation about potentially an adjustment. And finally, federal direct student loans. These have been around for more than 50 years. They used to be called the Stafford loans. Um, it's the best student loan on the planet. There's no cosigner. It's a reasonable interest rate. And they can't get in a huge trouble. It's $27,000 over 4 years. What can be really nice, and I did this with my daughters, is my wife and I did not want to just give them a full write the check and have everything taken care of for them. So to have some skin in the game, we asked them to take out the federal direct student loan. After freshman year, we paid off the freshman fee and so forth after each year. When you graduate, because it's only in their name, it's paid back on time. Um, they're going to have a credit rating of could be as high as 750 when they graduate, which can be a real differentiator when they go for that first little car loan or the pulling credit to get an apartment or something like that. So it's something that can definitely help. All right, we'll finish up the last couple of slides. So we've been talking about the FAFSA, the federal direct, or excuse me, this is the form that is run by Department of Education. It goes live about October 1st of every year. It's a little bit different where assets are evaluated at today's value. There's a 2-year look back. They're looking back to the last full tax year. So for our students right now that are seniors, they're looking back at 24. It's basically the high school graduation year minus 2. So if you've got a 2027 high school grad, they're going to look at the 2025 tax form. And we've already talked about just the custodial parent submits the form who provides the most aid. The next is CSS Profile, also goes live about October 1st, about 250 colleges. Be careful of the home equity. We talked a little bit about divorced and separated families that they need to supply for the majority of the CSS schools, their information. There are some circumstances, if there's never been contact, God forbid someone's even incarcerated, someone has left the country, and the stories are very, very difficult to work with families through. Many of the schools will entertain a waiver saying, hey, I have no idea where my ex-husband is. I don't know if he's dead or alive. I don't know if he's in the country. If he's not going to file anything, I don't even know how to get in touch with him. There's an opportunity to file a waiver and kind of work through that process. Okay, next slide. Okay, what income do colleges consider? We talked a little bit about prior year. Really, the biggest driver is income, and income, as we say, especially 2-year look back, like that ship left the dock. It's not something we can change a number or tweak, or it's kind of a done thing. So that's just that is what it is, but there's some other things that we can adjust on potentially on the asset side. And appeals. Appeals can be incredibly important. We College Aid Pro spend a lot of time working with families late winter, early spring. We're going to start those webinars starting next week, talking about appeals. What is that process? Every school has a process. You don't want to appeal every single school. That's not really legitimate, or we want to focus on kind of the top couple of schools. And really, it's about what are the significant circumstances. It's been a difficult 5 years. We had COVID. I've talked to families who have lost a parent, had long-term illnesses. Like, because it's a 2-year look back in income, things can change. Maybe you had a great 24, but since then it's been really terrible. There is an opportunity to bring that story and tell the rest of the story and work with the schools and see if adjustments can be made for aid.
Awesome. And Mike, do you want to I'll just talk about sort of next steps for everyone, and can
Yeah,
you put in the chat the booking link?
absolutely.
So whether, if it's easier to take a picture of this QR code that you see, or Mike will put a link in the chat. For us, we believe, action absorbs anxiety. And all of you are at a key moment in this process, whether you're a parent of a junior or a freshman, just kind of planning ahead to make sure you're in a good spot. So knowing how much financial aid you qualify for and what to do can really change everything about your college plan, everything we talked about tonight. So we are offering consults to walk through your numbers, talk through your options, and see if we can help. And just to make sure we keep it free, you go ahead, book tonight. Again, this is a free 15-minute consult. And someone did ask a great question in the chat, like, what's the difference between your platform, MyCap, and the services that you offer? So we have an amazing platform, which we weren't able to go through tonight. There's a free version. You can add up to 3 colleges. And then after that, it's $5 a month. You can end that $5 subscription at any point you want, but it allows you to add unlimited colleges, really do a detailed search for schools, for academics, personal fit, and obviously financial fit as well, and compare colleges. And it helps you along the way of, giving you tips on filling out the forms, appeals, all that. It's very much a DIY tool, and is great for a good chunk of families. The other service that we offer is actually having the professionals like Michael and like myself on the mission side, Mike on the financial aid side, actually walking you through and holding your hand and really doing a lot for you. So filling out the forms, doing the appeals for you, making sure that you're applying to the right colleges, and there are others that you miss. And that is, a 1, 2, or plus year, you know, working relationship with you. So we have both, but you can do the consult. Again, that's a 15-minute call. It's no charge, and we'll just give you a sense of, what we can offer and hopefully put you in the right direction. But really appreciate everyone joining us tonight. Be safe for the holidays coming up and have a great end to 2025, and really appreciate having you with us tonight.
Take care, everyone.